the EU Chips Act failed because they shouldn't have been chasing that market share number in the first place.
There's many areas of chips that are not logic that are very important.
If America doesn't apportion out some data centers to be built in EU, no UV machines for you guys.
Welcome to Supply Chain. I'm Tim Culpin from Culpium.
And I'm John from Asianometry.
John, the European Chips Act. People forget that it even exists. I was very big and deep into the US Chips Act, but there was a European version that came out. It seemed like a kind of a carbon copy of it. And I know you've looked into it. You did a video, didn't? What was the title of your video? It's a failure.
The EU Chips Act has failed.
Yes, that was pretty declarative. I won't ask you to rehash the whole video, but one thing I'm curious to know is, am I right in understanding that it was originally at least somewhat a carbon copy of the US version of the Chips Act?
I think the story of it is kind of interesting because it kind of came out of, I think the impetus for it was kind of in line with like the US is doing something, EU should do something as well. But I think the way it was sort of cobbled together is quite different.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it has more, its roots are more in another policy, maybe about 10 years earlier.
Oh.
The name eludes me, but the goal of that particular policy was that we're gonna, try to raise the percentage of chips made in Europe to whatever the percentage was. I think it was like 20% or something like that. It failed.
It got lost. Yeah.
Basically got lost. The chip makers, the IDMs didn't sign on. But when the EU Chips Act got revived, they basically thought to themselves, well, we can, try this again.
So the US version kind of lit a firecracker under their chair and they realized, oh, we better get going again because the US is going to steal all our chips in our chip industry and we better get on board with the program.
Kind of. I was more like when COVID hit, there was all these talk about like there's a chip shortage and all the factories were being shut down, and then the car factories weren't really getting anywhere.
And desperate calls were being made to Shinju.
Yeah, calls were being made to Shinju for reasons that elude me.
Yeah.
And then everyone was saying we should blah blah blah. I generally, and then they were like, say, oh, we need to do something.
So it's as much COVID as the US Chips Act, because the US Chips Act kind of came out of the COVID shortage as well, right?
Yeah, in some ways. And I think the approach is way different, right? Like they're trying to, they were structured in this very specific way where, one, you're going to do all this R&D, we're going to fund all these R&D, we're going to create these like test lines in different areas. And I think the areas were actually well chosen. It's like photonics, advanced packaging, some like post-Moore law kind of stuff.
So there was specific kind of semiconductor-related verticals as part of the EU Chips Act.
Yeah. So like in that first pillar, as they called it, like they were going to talk about this, all this forward-looking stuff.
Right.
Like they're all, and I thought they were fairly well chosen. I mean, when I was there in ITF World a couple of weeks ago, everyone was talking about like advanced packaging, photonics, advanced packaging, photonics. There was a little bit of talk about like post-Moore, transistor structures and stuff like that. I think that's all the research side. I think Europe is pretty good at that.
Right.
They're very, I never saw anything. I'm actually really impressed by how like institutions like IMEC have been really, really good recently about like the stuff that they're bringing out is getting increasingly more adopted within the industry.
So they've got a better kind of connection to industry needs and, what's next and what is important rather than just, PhDs stuck in a lab building cool stuff that never gets made.
At least IMEC is. There are other research institutes, I think there's in France and CA Leti and all the other ones. I think IMEC is pretty much a world leader.
Right.
But everyone else, CA Leti I think is good. But
let's just recap what IMEC is. It's basically kind of the world's R&D lab for semiconductors, right?
Yeah, they call it as I called it back as like a watering hole, where basically all these companies get together and they kind of co-work together on certain concepts, and they also fund research on certain things that they want to kind of get adopted or I guess licensed or something by the larger
And
semiconductor
who
companies.
funds IMEC? Like, what's its business model or their revenue?
I think they get money basically for doing these projects where they
Right.
basically lend out and do these co-working projects with various companies like TSMC and
Mm.
ASML, stuff like that. So I think like the EU Chips Act helped fund high-NA UV
Oh,
tool for them to be installed. I'm fairly sure that's true, right? Yeah.
yeah.
If not,
Which is ironic because we know that high NA UV is not quite getting traction right now. It will probably in future, but
it will. It will.
one day.
It works. I mean, it works. It's not a boondoggle, but
Right.
it is expensive. So I think that pillar is fine. Europe is really good at doing
Mm.
research, and I think there's like it's small scale, and you don't really need that much money to fund
Yeah.
stuff
The
like that.
US Chips Act there was money towards research and some packaging and stuff, but it was really primarily front end fabrication. I feel like the US Chips Act really should have been called the Save Intel Act because Gelsinger really did spend a lot of time during his tenure to talk it up and push for it. And TSMC, of course, got money out of it, but got less than Intel. One of the theories is that even though TSMC deserved more money, it wasn't Intel, so it wasn't allowed to get more money. But definitely a lot of the money went into that front end fabrication. And it wasn't really that targeted. I mean, Intel, TSMC, logic, right? And there is some money that went into back end and also into, say, silicon wafers for global wafers and so forth. But it wasn't as targeted as it seems the European Chips Act was, with very clear verticals of places where they thought time and energy should be put.
Well, on the research side, they kind of was they did some advanced packaging stuff, right?
Yeah, in the US Chips Act, but if you look at the amount of money, it was a very small amount of money.
But did it ever kind of like get dispersed that research part, or
Oh
did it?
yeah, yeah. It's not that it didn't exist. It's not like money for packaging didn't exist. It's just that the majority of the money was for front end fabrication. Global Wafers, for example, got money. And they don't do fabrication; they do slices of silicon. And I believe Amcor got money, and they're setting up packaging right next to TSMC in Arizona. And they're not fabrication, but the majority of it, and like reading the Chips Act and all of it, it's a very long document. You could tell that it was very much about front end fabrication and bringing it back to America.
Do you think that was a problem?
I think it's what they needed at
And
the
I think
time.
I'll say that because that's kind of what the issue with the EU Chips Act was also.
Well, I remember writing at the time in a previous life that people are forgetting about the role of packaging.
Mm.
And the one thing that I've been telling people, for years since TSMC Arizona was birthed, was that's all well and good, but it won't give the US any kind of chip independence because a chip comes off a wafer in Arizona, it gets put on a Boeing, it gets flown back to Taiwan for packaging and testing. And if we're talking about HP, high performance computing or AI, it's CoWoS in Taiwan by TSMC. And so that's nowhere near any kind of independence. But Amcor is now setting up, and TSMC itself is going to do some advanced packaging fabs in the US. But in the initial phases, there was not a lot happening, and they should have done more. I argued at the time for advanced packaging, but advanced packaging is coming online in the US. If there was to be a CHIPS Act 2 in the US, I don't think there will, but if there was, I think it would have to go beyond front end fabrication and go more into other areas.
It
Maybe
might need to go beyond packaging.
it might need to, ironically, a US CHIPS Act 2 should probably copy the Europe model, and let's not worry about just full on like volume of wafer starts, and instead focus on very clear verticals like co-packaged optics and GaN and various other non-silicon wafers and so forth. There's many areas of chips that are not logic that are very important, and so maybe a CHIPS Act 2 would be better allocating it to that.
Well,
And also memory. But anyway, let's get back to the European Chips Act.
the
Who
EU
paid
Chips,
for it? Who paid for it? Because like the
yeah.
US Chips Act came out of Congress. I mean, came from the US government. Did Brussels cover the EU Chips Act, or was it every country for themselves, or how did that work?
largely, I haven't finished breaking down the EU Chips Act. That's how complicated it is. There's 3 pillars. And this first pillar, the R&D stuff, is actually, a lot of it is pulled from the Brussels budget. And it's like maybe 1 or 2 billion euro. And the interesting thing is a lot of that's actually cobbled together from other parts of other like past like other acts and stuff like that. But it's budgeted from Brussels. The second part is a manufacturing. So this is they're gonna say we're gonna try to get states or not states, European countries like Germany and France to build to allow subsidies to build fabs.
Let's drill down into that. To allow.
Mm-hmm.
Put that in the context of the way Europe works.
So I didn't know this, but maybe this is like this is like 1990s WTO trade regime kind of stuff. But like, in those days, a European country was not necessarily allowed to grant state aid to individual companies. It's like favoritism or something like that.
Right.
And I think it's like Airbus. There's like a lot of back and forth, like Airbus and Boeing stuff. And like they basically were saying that like you can't really, it's to keep competition fair between countries. Otherwise big rich countries would be able to fund whatever they want. So then they basically loosened those restrictions with regards to semiconductors, which is why Germany was allowed to disperse some amount of money for TSMC's Germany fab that Intel was able to do its Magdeburg fab. So there's a lot of it's very interesting. I didn't really knew that sort of thing happened.
So the European Chips Act, or this pillar of it, was really just about, not even about money should go here or incentives go there, but just changing the law that would allow Europe to allow the countries to do what the Americans do all the time. Unwinding a lot of the handcuffs placed on them over the previous 30 years.
Or what Asia does all the time.
Yeah. So basically loosening the handcuffs on industrial policy.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of, I understand why they have this competition policy, but I also recognize that I think not setting aside the competition stuff, I think what it really led companies to do was like try to get these really big, flashy front end fabs, kind of like in the US, like you want to get this big, beautiful fab. And then what turned out to be the big problem was that it was kind of like an island. And in the end, that there wasn't, and I talked about it in the video, but like they talked, like you had this Nexpera debacle where kind of this Netherlands company was being taken over by a Chinese company. The Netherlands stepped in, and then China got really mad, and they banned these chips from getting packaged.
Yeah.
Not just advanced packaging, just regular packaging.
Right.
Just, and then this basically froze all the chips supply going to these European car makers, because these are really cheap chips, like literally like 10 cents, like 5 cents, like really cheap. But because they've been spec'd in for years, and it takes, and as we talked earlier, like speccing in a new chip is a disaster. It takes forever. Everything got frozen, and then, So, stepping, like, my point in that video, when I was thinking about EU Chips Act as a failure, isn't necessarily because it didn't hit the 20% or whatever percent that it hit. I think that was the only criteria, it's going to be a total miss. I think it's going to be, like, there were like 8 or 9% a couple of years ago. Now it's going to be something like 6, 5.
It's gone down.
It's gone down. It's gotten worse. Like, this is not changing. And
so just to clarify, you're talking about percentage of chips used or sold in Europe that come from a European fab.
No. World. Like the world market percentage, which percent is from Europe?
So from 8 or 9% of global chips being made in Europe, the goal was to get to 20%.
Yeah.
But it's actually gone backwards to 5 or 6%. Yeah, that's, if the goal was 20%, you've gone backwards. That's a failure. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like kind of.
Now, is that because the world's chip industry has just grown so much and the Europeans couldn't keep pace, or is the amount of chips being made in Europe actually gone backwards in real terms?
I think that the actual number of chips is pretty much stable, but I think the thing is that the Europe hasn't grown as much as are as fast as what's going on in China, Taiwan, Japan, even Korea, right? Like
As well as the US, yeah.
U.S., yeah, and I don't think I one of the big problems when I was sitting and thinking about this videos is I don't see a path towards generating that demand, right?
Well, Europe's almost proud of its no haste, be patient approach to economic growth and development anyway. Whereas Asian countries like, wow, let's all just throw everything at this and we'll get 10, 12% growth. Europe's like, yeah, 3%'s fine. We don't need more.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of the stuff that they make also is underrepresented revenue wise, right?
Mm,
Because we talked about Nextera, right? Like these are old
cheap. Yeah.
chips, small
Yeah.
chips. They're sophisticated. They're analog, RF. Like they have a lot of that, or MEMS. They have a lot of that, but like the problem with that is that it doesn't sell for very high, but they're very important.
Yeah.
So like I think that was kind of like the challenge for Europe. And I think like 20 years ago at the turn of the century, millennia, like 2010 or 2005, like they had very high market share. It's like 20%. I think one of the things that I feel it's interesting is that when I visited Alcatel, the former Alcatel,
Oh, wow.
and they were really big in like
They were a player.
ADSL, right?
Yeah.
They fabbed a lot of the chips early on.
Yeah.
They made a lot of their own
It
equipment.
was their market for the making.
It was their factory. They had a factory. I
Yeah.
was like, you guys have a factory in Europe, in Belgium, right? Like, so things have changed a lot. I was saying as recent as 2000, like Europe was like a tech powerhouse.
Yeah.
And now you're kind of seeing a lot less of that.
Yeah. The two big European tech names are like ASML and Spotify, right?
Spotify still they're in Europe?
Yeah. Well,
I thought they moved to New York.
well, they're still a European company, but of course ASML, I think, is Europe's largest or second largest company by market cap.
I think it is number one, right?
Yeah, but in terms of European tech, I look forward to all the hate mail we get from our European friends. Supplychainpod@gmail.com. But please, in English only, my European friends, or Mandarin. But yes, we don't speak all the exotic European languages.
I mean, ASML, yeah, that's the $700 billion giant. But then Europe also has ASM, Hextron, Bessie. I'm surprised by a lot of companies that do semi in Netherlands equipment.
Right.
I think Netherlands is kind of like a shining spot there.
Yeah. And ST Micro is an underappreciated company, I think.
Definitely underappreciated. I think they're really good companies. I think, but like, how do you? So if you don't want to raise the percentage market cap or market percentage, what do you do?
What's your point? Yeah, what is your goal?
Like, what is your goal?
So you're talking about the pillars. You've talked about the first two. Was there a third?
There's a third, which is like emergency monitoring.
Huh?
Yeah, that's the same thing I replied. Like it's like to monitor whether some crisis is happening and
there's a shortage.
Yeah, there's some sort of shortage and try to scramble people to fix it. I have absolutely no idea what that pillar is about. There's been very little progress on it, and I haven't heard anything.
Was
since.
This like, oh, we can't let the COVID crisis happen again, so we need some system that monitors the supply chain to let us know when the well is running dry,
right?
And then we've coded some agent that would automatically dial Shinju and tells TSMC to dial up more chips. Is that?
I was thinking it was more like they were kind of like group buying. Like group buying, doing cross qualification, stuff like that. Very niche stuff. It didn't help Nextera with the Nextera situation, but at least they're thinking about it. They're gonna do a Chips Act or EU Chips Act 2, which I think is the tough part because I don't know what they're trying to change the focus to. They don't know what they want. I think it's pretty clear they don't know what they want.
Conclusion that the European Chips Act failed is based basically on they wanted to get to 20% of global market. It went backwards, therefore it's a fail. Is there anything else that is your benchmark for failure that a European Chips Act 2 could improve on?
I mean, I guess it depends on what they want, right? Like the reason I felt the EU Chips Act failed, the first one, is not necessarily because it missed that market share number, but they shouldn't have been chasing that market share number in the first place.
Right.
That's my main point. And they're thinking, they need to think more forward, and they need to think more. I don't want to sound bad, but they want to think more growth oriented, or you can think more safety oriented, right? If you're saying this is something that you want to protect the existing industrial base you guys have, and you want to do it from the chips perspective, there's things you can do. You can incentivize packaging to be built. You can do the cross qualification stuff.
Right.
You can subsidize certain technologies to be updated.
So it sounds like a lot of like standards body type stuff that could solve a lot of these.
Yeah, really kind of like, it's not going to make a headline, but it's going to help improve the industrial base, what's left of it in Europe.
Right.
Then you can think of in a more growth-oriented, more demand space. You can say, what can we do to help get companies common to build things that would drive chip demand? So you can think about the SoftBank thing, right? $75 billion, whatever. Get Masa here, get Sam to come here and build data centers and stuff like that as well. And then make sure that a certain portion of that goes into the EU base.
Well, the Taiwanese are looking into it. Foxconn, for example, is doing a deal with Thales, Thales for packaging. And Foxconn's chairman met with Macron recently. In France to do more. I think it was also AI data centers. So people are looking at Europe again. So if you were flown to Brussels and appointed the EU chip commissioner, John Wise just been announced as EU chip commissioner, what would be the one headline policy goal that you put at the top of the press release for CHIPS Act 2? If
I wanted to make headlines, I mean, that's a good one. I mean, I would, first I would you'd have EU purchase a share in ASML. And then you will go to the Americans and you say, if America doesn't apportion out some data centers to be built in EU, invest in the EU, no UV machines for you guys.
Oh.
I actually don't think this is something that is far-fetched, actually. Like one of the things I heard when they keep saying
makes sense.
ASML.
But mercantilism is in, protectionism is in, globalism is dead, as Morris Chang would say. So it would be in keeping with the current vibe of the world, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Just buy 5%, 20%. Well, how much does US own Intel?
Maybe don't buy. You just tell them to give it to you.
Yeah. Just tell them to give it to you. And then I'd be like, look, ASML, you are our champion. We will give you every resource you can. I know there's that airport plot that you're going to want to build a new factory. It's yours. All the lawsuits right now, they're keeping it from happening. Gone.
Yep. Problem solved.
Problem solved. And then I think that might be that might catch people's headlines. And then,
well, say to the Americans, if you don't build your AI data centers here, not only no EUV for you, but we'll sell it to the Chinese.
Yeah, we'll drop one off the back of the truck.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Thank you for elucidating this. It's a topic we could talk about a lot longer. You've been listening to another episode of Supply Chain. I'm Tim Colpin from Colpim.
And I'm John from Asianometry. Have a good one.